Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to British Culture Albion Never Dies. In this episode, I'm delighted to be talking to Alex Lamas, who you might know from Instagram as Sifu Lamas, or on YouTube as Always Say Yes to Adventure. He talks to me about his love of movies set in the British Empire, such as Zulu, The Four Feathers, The Man Who Would Be King, and Lawrence of Arabia. Those last two we talk about a great deal. We talk about why they impacted him, the places he's been, and of course about some of the original writing. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Okay, recording in progress. Hello, Alex Lamas. Thank you very, very much for joining me again. Once again, I return to the well of knowledge that is Alex Lamas.
Yes, here for another adventure.
And
really good.
And for those listening on the podcast, you are wearing something very special today. Could you describe your outfit today?
Right now, it's a British colonial pith helmet from the 1800s, early 1900s.
Okay. What does that helmet symbolize? What is it?
Any movie that has this pith helmet in, I'm in for it. I'm totally captivated by. So it's like if they're wearing this helmet, I'm watching the movie. So there was like Zulu Dawn, Breaker Morant, The Man Who Would Be King, Four Feathers, you name it. If they had this helmet, Gunga Din, I'm done. I'm in.
Okay. Okay. And I'm happy to hear it. Happy to have such an enthusiast with me today. And my first question is the simplest and the most complicated. Why?
Why?
Yeah.
I've been, along with many interests that I've had, Kung Fu, China, I had been an Anglophile since I was wee boy. I started watching Monty Python probably as a little child. Then I was watching The Saint. I was watching, there was a science fiction show called UFO that was really popular. I was a massive fan of The Saint when I was like 6 years old for some reason. I have no idea. When you're a little kid, you said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be a fireman, a fighter pilot, an airline pilot, this? Because of The Saint, I wanted to be a jewel thief.
Oh, wow. Okay. What did your teacher
They
say
would
for
ask
that?
me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, international jewel thief.
Okay.
Like, what? So I've always been an Anglophile. And then I saw Lawrence of Arabia and I was blown away. Now, the first time I saw it was on a TV, and back then TVs were small. But then I had the immense opportunity when I was a teenager. They showed the first restoration. It was actually a restoration that Steven Spielberg was involved with, where they restored missing footage. Now, when Lawrence of Arabia was first released in the theaters, they actually cut it. They cut about 20 minutes out of it because they wanted to have more showings during the day. This was the first fully restored version with the 20 minutes put back in, and it was shown at the Ziegfeld Theater. And back then, the Ziegfeld Theater in Manhattan, New York City, where I grew up, was the largest movie theater in Manhattan, I think next to Radio City Music Hall. In fact, I think it was actually bigger than Radio City Music Hall. So I saw this on a massive screen, 70 millimeter, fully restored version, full 4 hour version of Lawrence of Arabia. They had to have an intermission, of course, in between. And I was just dumbfounded. I was just blown away. I couldn't believe what I was watching. It's just the scope, the epic adventure of it all was just absolutely amazing. So I started doing a deep dive into British, not British colonial history per se, but British colonial history movies. So then there was also The Man Who Would Be King, which was probably my favorite non-James Bond Sean Connery movie. And if you haven't seen that one, Sean Connery and Michael Caine play soldiers of fortune in India who meet. Well, this was a novella by Rudyard Kipling, right?
Yeah.
And this was made into a movie, and the story sort of takes place where Rudyard Kipling as a character played by Christopher Plummer in the film, and two soldiers of, ex-military, British military. I guess they were sergeants. They weren't officers. They were
Mm.
enlisted men. They come up with a plan to become kings of Kafiristan. And at that time, Kafiristan was a real place. It's now called Nuristan in Afghanistan. But it was a place of tribal, it was a tribal area that was non-Muslim.
Mm.
So it wasn't really well traveled by Westerners, if at all, at the time of Kipling's writing. I think there was like one expedition that went in there, but it was a very mysterious place. So he wrote this story about these two, ex-soldiers who go off to try to become kings of Kafiristan and actually succeed, but their hubris comes to a very, sad and, pitiful
Mm.
ending. But, a very profound film and and just a pure adventure. It's just a pure adventure movie. And so I think it was just I had always had this, adventurous, come from an adventurous family. I'd
Mm.
always had a thirst for, seeing the world and having lots of adventures. And so adventure films were just, my love. Indiana Jones, films like that. There was another wonderful Sean Connery movie where he plays a North African, a Moroccan Berber. Of all-
Oh, okay.
Oh,
With a
yeah, it's
with a
called The
thick
Wind and
Scottish
the Lion.
accent.
Yes, he plays, and he plays. The interesting thing about Sean Connery's career is that he plays an Englishman with a Scottish accent, James Bond. He plays a North African Berber with a Scottish accent in The Wind and the Lion. He plays a Egyptian Spaniard in Highlander with a
Yeah.
Scottish accent. And it's a movie called Highlander, and he's not the Highlander. We have a Frenchman playing a Highlander, so but anyway, The Wind and the Lion is another beautiful
Mm.
film about Morocco in 1900. So if you ever get a chance of that, and even though he has a Scottish accent, he just gives an amazing performance. He's so charismatic in that film. So yeah, but Lawrence of Arabia and maybe The Man Who Would Be King were probably my two favorites among that
Mm.
genre. You know.
It's interesting because these films are sometimes compared to like American Westerns, right? But there is something different in them in terms of how the interactions with the other, like the interactions with societies that are settled, fully formed. There's something different about it.
Well, the English attitude, first of all, and the English, culture is definitely very different. There's sort of an arrogant politeness among the English when dealing with the other, as opposed to the sort of brash bulliness of Americans when they were dealing with the same thing.
I've had that said back to me before about, yeah, you took over the world, but you're just so polite about it.
Yeah. But even watching and rewatching Lawrence of Arabia a few years ago, and I just recently rewatched The Man Who Would Be King, you do see the very English attitudes. There's a line in and I don't know if it's in the book The Man Who Would Be King, but there's a line where Sean Connery's character Daniel Drabbit says, "Bringing enlightenment to the darkest regions of the world."
Yes. Yeah.
And that was their attitude,
Hmm.
that they were bringing, culture, light, enlightenment, civilization to, these darker regions.
Yeah.
So, again, it was sort of a polite arrogance of the whole
But
thing.
interesting kind of at a remove because they're movies, right? And you've mentioned they
Mhm.
have kind of a bittersweet outcome, to put it
Mhm.
one way. So if
Yeah.
you wholeheartedly believe what he believes, you can feel that you're well represented on screen. If you
Yeah.
believe that he's absolutely wrong, you can say, well, the outcome suggests otherwise. There's something
Yeah.
about both Lawrence of Arabia and The Man Who Would Be King where actually a range of point of views, you might watch that film and come away believing you got what you wanted.
Well, the thing is that both films, I recently realized, have a very interesting connection in the sense that they're both about hubris.
Mm.
Because in The Man Who Would Be King, the Sean Connery character, Daniel Dravit, does become king. And it's his arrogance about it that leads to his downfall because he starts believing that he's actually can be king. And when they find out that, when they find out that he's, they think the locals think that he's a god.
Mm.
And when they find out that he's just a man, they execute him. The whole arc of Lawrence of Arabia is him starting out as humble, then becoming very, very um, he really believed in himself and he believed in his own mind over matter. There's a scene where he holds up a match and he puts it out with his fingers.
Mm.
And another, like, lieutenant there who was just sort of staying by says, "Oh, how'd you do that?" And he goes, he tries it and he goes, "Oh, it hurts." And he goes, "What's the trick?" And Lawrence says, "The trick is, my dear Potter, not minding that it hurts." So he's had this incredible mind over matter, this credible will that leads him to succeed. But once
Mm.
having succeeded, his arrogance leads to his downfall, and he becomes completely disillusioned with everything and realizes that he wasn't this amazing, Lawrence of Arabia, but
Mm.
just a human being, and it brings him down crashing.
That's
Less tragic, although in the film starts off with him as his death, but the death happens 20, 30 years later.
yeah.
But it's it has a very similar arc of how arrogance and hubris is ultimately the downfall of the both these individuals. And I wonder if that has something to do with the British culture or the British mindset as well.
Oh, it's especially in the 60s when they're made, right, as the
Yeah.
movement is decolonialization, right? So the filmmakers are
Mhm.
very sensitive, very aware to this.
Yeah. But it's written in the book too, and
It
Rudyard
is.
Kipling wrote about that, and he wrote it. He kind of was probably aware of it back and he was 22 when he wrote that book. He
Wow.
was young.
Okay.
Yeah, this was one of the first stories that he published, one of the
Mm.
early stories that he published. So he was a young man when he wrote this story, and, probably based on some stories he heard from people when he
Mm.
was growing up in India himself.
And one of the
So,
interesting aspects of it is that, and we have it in the movie as well, right? So I believe in the book, Kipling's writing as himself, as a journalist, saying,
mhm.
I know
Yeah,
I'm just a storyteller, but please believe me. And I heard
yeah,
this from a beggar who asked me, please believe me. And so
yeah,
we already have a couple of layers removed, even at the
yeah.
outset of the tale of it's almost like over the hill and far away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely. But just to have that sort of idea of that sort of hubris leading to someone's downfall, I think is also a very English
Hmm.
sort of, part of the the cultural mindset of being British. Not to be, not to think of yourself too much.
Well, like a friend of mine who he got a new coat, and so he kept going to work half an hour early so people wouldn't see him wearing his new coat. He couldn't
Oh,
stand the
see?
attention of someone recently asked if the friend was me. It's not. I keep my routine, but my friend
Well,
is.
there you go.
Maybe I'm
See
not
that?
very English after all. But yeah, there's an interesting thing both stories have in common. When other people believe the hero is a god or a demigod, they succeed. But when they start to believe it themselves,
It leads to their undoing, definitely.
yes.
Yeah. And so that's interesting about the two films. And so those two movies, yeah, had that in mind. So
Mm.
I don't know if I thought about it, back then as much as I did now, more recently, but it was probably something that was there, you know.
I was reading a piece, so there's a book written about Lawrence of Arabia and its reception in America specifically. Came out in 1999, and the academic talks about how he went crazy for it as a kid, and then he went to see that re-release, the
Hmm.
restoration release, I think in
Yeah.
the 80s, and he
Hmm.
took his mom to see it. This is in
Yeah.
Chicago, as far removed from the environment of the movie
Yeah.
as I feel you'd get. And as they went
Mm.
home, he was apologizing to them. Oh, I'm sorry, it's 4 hours long. I've dragged you out here. And the wind was going against their cheeks and it's freezing. And the mom was like, didn't you see the film? He said, the trick is not to mind. Something about it that cuts across cultures, those
Yeah.
characters.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But just also just the adventure of it, the otherworldliness of it, and just they're just wonderfully made films. You had Lawrence of Arabia, directed by David Lean, who did, Bridge on the River Kwai and Dr. Zhivago. You had The Man Who Would Be King was John Huston, who has just a huge list of just fantastic films to his name. So, these were made by master filmmakers at the
Mm,
height of their powers, both of them. Yeah.
absolutely. And they tell the story of not just two individuals, but then the ripple effects around them. Right. So we see
Yeah.
whole societies and whole movements, which a lot of
Mhm.
filmmakers have tried and not many have got even close to.
Yeah. So they're just amazing. And then also having, not that long ago been to the locations that these films
Yes.
too. That was one of the great moments of my life. So here I am growing up watching these movies, and then finally I get to visit
Mm.
Atlas Studios, and I get to visit one of the major locations of both films, a place called Ait Ben Haddou. And Ait Ben Haddou was a probably 11th century, maybe even older, sort of a fortified village. I think they call it a Qassam, and it's has been preserved since for the past, 1,000+ years in the same way, with people still kind of living in some of the dwellings. There's no electricity, there's no running water. So it's a very austere lifestyle. But to see this place for real and know that Lawrence of Arabia was shot there. Man Who Would Be King was shot there. The Living Daylights, that was the fortress of Cameron Shah.
Hmm.
The Afghan, Mujahid,
Well, they pronounce it interestingly in the film, don't they? Because we'd normally say Mujahideen, and Timothy Dalton said
Mujahideen. Thank you.
Mujahideen.
Mujahideen. Yeah, Mujahideen. He's the Mujahideen leader. Sorry for butchering that. But, and then walking these streets for real
Mm.
was just an amazing experience, and seeing this place for real. Going to Atlas Studios and seeing some of the leftover
Oh.
vehicles and pieces from the Living Daylights as well. It's
Mm.
still there. And then being in Morocco and just being around the culture, going into the Sahara Desert, riding camels,
Mhm.
hanging out with Berbers for real was just a mind-blowing adventure for myself, as well.
And you got to ride a camel, which I've never done.
Yeah. It's actually it was fun. It was fun. I wouldn't want to do it all day. I was watching a documentary about the making of Lawrence, and they said they had to ride camels like 6 hours a day, and
Mm.
their their butts were just burning. It was so painful. But yeah, it was for the hour plus that we did. It was really enjoyable. Just
That's a good
an
length of
amazing
time.
experience. Yeah, it was an amazing experience. Of course, it's like a touristy thing. That's their only income in Morocco is
Mm.
tourism. So they're very, very set up for, giving people a very nice experience, doing things like that.
Yeah,
So
that's fantastic that you got to go to the UNESCO World Heritage Site.
yeah,
That is
yeah.
used in a lot of films, but it genuinely is an important
It's
place
a
for itself.
real place. It's a historical place, and it's just a gorgeous, stunning place to be there. And I could see why, film companies from, all over. I mean, Game of Thrones was shot there. Many, many, many Hollywood films were shot. Any place that needs a desert, regardless, they go to there. They go to the Atlas Studios. They go to Ait Ben Haddou, and they use those two places for filmmaking. And it's doubled for Afghanistan, Arabia, but sometimes it's Morocco, but a lot of times it's other deserts around the world. Even it was in Kundun, Martin Scorsese's Kundun. It was the Gobi Desert in Asia, where they had these Buddhist temple. There's a Buddhist temple in the
Ah.
Atlas Studios.
Can I ask,
Working
what was the
was
most interesting thing you learned whilst you're out there?
what's the most interesting thing? I don't know. One of the things that was very interesting to me was how they navigate the dunes
Hmm.
because the dunes don't stay the same every day.
Hmm.
And it's literally an ocean of sand. I mean, there is no defining features that are permanent whatsoever. Maybe if you can see the distant Atlas Mountains
Hmm.
on a good day, but they learn how to navigate those dunes the way sailors navigate the ocean because there's no other way to do it. But and so they can go all around and they just know where they are.
Mm.
And the dune, like I said, because of the winds, the dunes change daily.
Yeah.
So you can go out to the dunes one day and it's going to be completely different the next day, and over the week it's a completely different landscape.
Hmm.
So how they navigate through, at night through the star, they do use the stars, but they just have this amazing way of just knowing where they are
Hmm.
and knowing how to get from one place to another because there's no defining features
Yeah. Yeah.
whatsoever. It's an amazing skill that they have to do that. And living out and there we met Berbers who live out there. That's their home.
Mm.
And they herd goats from one place to another, and that's what they do to survive is
Hmm.
they're goat herders. And we met these people living in tents, and they'll stay in one place for a couple of weeks and then they'll move to another place for a couple of weeks and another place for a couple of weeks. And that's their lifestyle. And they still live this lifestyle.
Mm.
So
And
it was
then
beautiful.
you're back to New York.
And back to New York. One wonders which one's actually civilization.
Was thinking one world, different universes.
Yeah. But just seeing, but being in the places of these films that were just so, very integral in for me as a kid growing
Mm.
up. I became a filmmaker, and for 25 years I was in the film business. I was a storyboard artist and in the design and the art department, but
Mm.
it was movies like
Mm.
Lawrence of Arabia, Raiders of the Lost Ark, The Man Who Would Be King. These were the films that inspired me to say, okay, this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to try to create, and be a part of my life.
Mm.
So, seeing these movies was just amazing to me.
It's a glimpse
And
of
yeah,
another world. And you talk about the
yeah,
adventure, right? And it's
yeah,
helped you in your professional life and moving out to
yeah,
see the world
yeah,
depicted.
yeah. And like I said, I always had this adventurous, spirit. My family, lived all over the world. I had family in Greece. I have family, in different parts of the world. I spent a lot of time in Greece as a kid. I think you spent a lot of time in near not too far away in Cyprus,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, you know what that lifestyle is like.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I am curious. We've talked about the films, which are very impactful. I found it very useful seeing the films as a child because they didn't have a lot of mental imagery for places described, right? Lawrence of Arabia or more Kipling's
Did you
work.
not watch those films as a kid or?
I watched them as a kid, and that was useful because I'd been reading the books and I didn't know like
Oh,
what am I supposed to be imagining.
so did
Um,
you read Seven Pillars of Wisdom?
I have read it. In fact, I read it whilst I was out in Saudi Arabia. So I worked with the
Mm.
Islamic sheikhs out there, and so I read it.
Oh,
And I've
wow.
seen the remains of the railway that, he blew up. So it's not quite complete anymore. But I've seen the remains of that. And my father had read the Seven Pillars of Wisdom when he worked in Kuwait. He was training the Kuwait Army,
Mhm.
which is kind of a successor job to Lawrence's of working
Mhm.
with
Yeah, yeah.
the people out
So
there.
how so you're in the region, you're reading that book.
Yeah.
What did you learn from the book and from living there? And was there a difference, or how did that
Mm.
affect your worldview of that era and of that place?
So first of all, Kipling's writing is rarely accessible, right? They're short
That's that
stories.
Kipling. we're talking about Seven Pillars of Wisdom.
Yeah,
To
so
be
Seven Pillars of
Lawrence.
Wisdom, I will say,
Yeah.
is the less accessible colonial reading.
Okay.
It's very self-reflective, it's very poetical,
Mhm.
and it's written in a high kind of way I struggle to attain. But there are brilliant bits, right?
Mhm.
There
He
are
was a great
pages.
writer.
Yeah, if you're on that wavelength, right? So I'm not always on
Yeah.
his wavelength. There's
Yeah.
certain bits that really hit home. One of them is description of Arab culture and Arab kind of interactions. It is a different culture. They come from a different history. So it's fascinating to read his insight because, of course, cultures change and evolve.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't say, especially now, Saudi culture would be quite different. When I was there, yeah, only a decade ago, but under a different king, you could see elements very much still there, and
Mhm.
especially with the more conservative individuals I was working with, you could see
Mhm.
very strong elements. So it was really good as a piece of human insight.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
So, but did it change your view of, the culture there, or did
It's
it
hard to
affect your view?
say
Or?
because I was there for a short time, 6 months, and
Mhm.
it was a very intense time. Those
Yeah.
6 months impacted me generally more than
Yeah.
years, maybe a decade of my life. It was very, very impactful. It's hard to say, was it the book or was it just everything?
Mm.
So, for example, I was going out to see the railway he blew up. I went out to see the mud brick
Mhm.
towns and villages as well as the modern cities. So it was a very, very full and intense experience.
Yeah.
But it was very, very useful sometimes to have that to hang on to as an insight. Brits have been out here before.
Mhm.
I'm not the first. Um, and this society has been observed, and to see a bit of continuity, right? That's how it was, and I
Mhm.
see how it is now. And actually, that gave it a bit of depth. That was really, really useful.
How did you feel that they treated you?
They treated me much better than many people who live there. I saw some of the richest people I've seen in my life and some of the poorest and most deprived people in my life, and you see them side by side. And you
Mm.
see incredibly generous behavior and incredibly ungenerous behavior. So it was a time of intense extremes.
Did you see any of it as a result of British influence?
It's hard I mean, for me, obviously, because I speak Turkish as a second language, I'm always hyper aware. They were under the Turks for so many centuries compared to the
Mhm.
Brits for a generation or two. So
Mhm.
even though it was influential, especially Saudi and Kuwait have now had American influence for
Mhm.
so much longer and Ottoman influence for so much longer. If I see British influence, I'm impressed, especially
Mhm.
because it tends to be favorable.
Really interesting.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
it is funny because in a way that whole region is an invention of England.
I've heard this. I sometimes take the counter example of, a lot of this is dependent on the Ottoman regions and just where people live anywhere. Um,
No,
yeah.
but the countries, the way they
Yeah.
were divided up,
Hmm.
the creation of things like Jordan, Iraq, those
Yeah.
were British creation. Jordan and Iraq were British creations. They didn't exist prior.
Yeah. And it's interesting, a lot
England
of it goes to
created those
Gertrude
countries.
Bell. So
Yeah,
Gertrude
yeah,
Bell is like, there is a movie about Gertrude
yeah,
Bell, but I mean, I
yeah.
couldn't get through it to be honest. So she's the one without an epic, heavy hitting film.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's funny because you see in Lawrence of Arabia, you see the formation of the Middle East in
Mm,
that film.
yeah.
The treaty, was it called, the Sykes-Picot Treaty at the end,
Hmm.
literally carves up and is probably and a lot of people will say that treaty is in part, if not wholly, responsible for a lot of the troubles
Mm,
that exist today in the region, is because the way that treaty was handled. And it wasn't
hmm,
just the British, it was the French and the English sort
hmm.
of deciding who gets what without really consulting the individual people who actually live there.
And that's depicted in the film, and it's an interesting part of
Yes.
the film.
Well, that's part of the downfall of Lawrence, is that, or
Mm,
his disillusionment with the whole process, because his purpose there was to give the Arabs a state,
hmm,
and that didn't happen. And he saw that the British sort of reneged on this deal
hmm.
that they said they were going to fulfill, and they didn't. Um, there's a whole lot of political stuff that we won't get into about that, but
Yeah. But again, to an early point, you could come at that from different political angles, right? I don't think I
oh
politically
yeah,
agree with the filmmakers, right? But I enjoy seeing it. I think it connects in a
oh
weird
it
way
happened.
to
History.
but it connects in a weird way to like Star Trek: The Next Generation, which I think is something we both connect to, right? Because okay, there's a moral
What's that?
dilemma every week, right? In The Next
Okay.
Generation, you could come
Yes.
at this from all kinds of points of view. You might not agree with the
Okay.
main character, but you can watch it and enjoy how it unfolds, right, as a moral dilemma.
Yes. Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
Lawrence of Arabia and The Man Who Would Be King, you can come from different angles, but really enjoy the depth to which they explore the ideas.
Oh yeah, because both of them, it's the ideas of how, you know, the West or England in this case,
Mm.
has influenced these areas and shaped them and changed them. And, but here's an interesting question. Did those areas like Arabia, like India, like Pakistan, like Afghanistan
Mm.
change England?
100% yes. I mean, I absolutely yes. Yes.
And how do you think it changed England as an Englishman?
I mean, it's an interesting thing because it connects very much to the English middle class a huge amount. I think now people tend to think, oh, it was all upper class guys going over there. But in reality, the upper class already had their kingdom. It was here.
Well,
But
Daniel Dravitt and Peachy Carnahan were not upper class. They were
exactly.
lower class.
So I think that's what the film really highlights. It was, and they say it was detriments like us that built this empire.
Yeah,
And
detriments. Detriments. Who's detriments that built his bloody empire? Bloody
exactly.
empire.
So I can say my family, as I've mentioned before, they came from Ireland, right? But they joined the
Yeah.
British Army and went out to India. So I said
Mhm,
that I read Kipling when I was quite young because
mhm,
my great grandparents and so on were collecting the books as they came out.
mm.
My great grandfather in
Wow.
particular
Are
connected.
those original?
These are the 1920s editions that
Oh,
my
okay.
great grandfather collected whilst he was out in India. Now,
Wow.
some of them
Even
he would
those
write
must be
extensive
valuable.
notes.
Yeah.
um, to give his experience. My great grandmother
Mhm,
was out there, he was out there. My grandfather was born in India, as were
mm,
generations of his family. So they had some of these books. Some of them have sadly fallen apart into,
mhm.
dust, essentially. But they kept notes, which I read as a child,
Wow.
um, of appropriate. There's somebody with our family name is in Kim, which I think is the best book.
Really
Um,
interesting.
and he has a position and is in places where obviously it's been expanded by Kipling, and I think
Yeah.
he's been given a promotion. But where else do you come across someone with my family name and my spelling? Um, they're in the right
Yeah.
place at the right time.
Yeah.
So I'll never prove it, but it
So
seems to
you
be
have a
related.
very strong connection to Kipling.
Absolutely, and I find it really, really interesting to read it. But as I say, as a child, I could get some kind of connection, but I didn't have an image. So the movies, the Pith Helmet
Mhm.
movies,
Yeah.
suddenly I can kind of perceive it. I can see it aside from family photos.
Yeah, and he was probably one of the earliest adventure writers
Mm,
as well. So, he's bringing these areas back home to England and to the West, and bringing
absolutely.
these places back, and stories like The Man Who Would Be King and places like Kafiristan,
Hmm. Which I
So
always found a funny name because, Kafir is a non-believer in a lot of
yeah,
Islamic languages. So I always found it,
yeah. Well,
it's
that
not
was
always
that
meant.
was the idea because these
Yeah.
the people who lived in that region at that time were non-Muslim.
Hmm.
So they were, and then Nuristan is enlightened.
Ah, okay.
See, they became Nur once the Islam reached them, it became Nuristan. It changed to Nuristan, the enlightened
Very clever.
land of the enlightened.
I hope we can all become enlightened someday.
And so in the book, I don't remember there being much any, if any, Masonic references in it.
Hmm.
But in the film, it's a major plot point.
Yeah,
You
and it's
know,
very, very explicit.
it's a very explicit in the film, and especially the connection to Alexander,
Yeah.
because Alexander the Great did go through that region,
Hmm.
during his time. He did, affect a lot of those cultures and left behind a lot of, Grecian artwork. And even if you look at a lot of the ancient Buddhist statuary of the era, it has a massive Hellenistic influence.
Mm.
these ancient Buddhist statues that look like Greek statues. So his influence was profound. In the movie, Peachy Carnahan, Michael Caine steals the watch from Rudyard Kipling, and
Yes.
on the end of it has a little Mason
Hmm.
symbol on it, and he realizes, oh, he's a Mason. Kipling must be a Mason, so he tries to return it, and there's a whole funny thing about that. But then late, towards the end of the film, they're gonna test Daniel Drabbit, Connery's character, and and they don't believe that he's a god, and they're gonna kill him, and they rip open his shirt, and he has the Mason symbol. And then they go and they show that they're underneath a rock, a very, a hidden symbol is the exact same Masonic symbol.
Hmm.
Now, was Alexander a Freemason? I don't think so. I don't think Mason really actually goes back that far.
Okay.
But was it a great
Mm.
conceit in the film? Oh, it was genius. And then they had the God with the all-seeing eye, which is a big Masonic, the all-seeing eye of God, which is a big Masonic symbol as well. So,
Again, just because I spent far too much time in the university library today, I couldn't resist. I found an article on the symbology of eyes in The Man Who Would Be King, just for the movie, and
mm,
how often it's at points where people realize things, or are they being perceived? Are they not being perceived?
in
And
the
of course,
book or
one of
the
the
film?
in the film,
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
do
and
tell.
oh, but I mean, as you described, right? So it's when his chest is open. So is he being perceived as who he is? Or
Hmm.
not who he is? Are they perceiving themselves correctly? Other people are perceiving them as gods. Are they perceiving themselves as gods?
Hmm.
It's another way of saying seeing. And is one of the
Hmm.
characters only fully enlightened when he loses one of his eyes?
Yeah,
Everyone in the film has a certain blindness, including
yeah,
literally, for the
yeah,
two main characters at one point. So
yeah,
yeah, the ability to see and perceive is actually front and center for
yeah.
the movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In the monks in the film, they keep their eyes closed through the battlefield because they don't want to see anything horrible. They only want to see
Mm.
beauty. So they walk through the battlefields with their eyes closed, completely blind. And that's so I guess yeah, you're right. It is. And then they have the God with the all-seeing eye, and then the Masonic symbol with the all-seeing eye. So seeing and perceiving is a is a big part of that movie. Now you told me that they do have Masonic references in the book.
That's right. And they're relatively quiet is one way of describing it. Certainly as a child, I wouldn't have picked it up except it was kind of explained to me, pointed out to me. So there's certain code words and phrases. There are books on the Masonic language within it. But of course, at the time, Masons were relatively not open compared to how they are
Really?
today. So they
Yeah.
weren't so open
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah,
about
yeah.
being Masons at the
So
time.
Kipling
Whereas,
was a Mason?
yes, yes, he did play a role
Okay.
in a Masonic lodge at different parts of his life. So
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
my grandfather was a Mason
okay.
as well. Yeah, he just told me the way he described it was just they would get together, play cards, and do some charity on the odd weekend. And that was about it. It wasn't really a big deal.
It is a charitable organization that they are
Yeah,
quite open now. You can collect
yeah,
Mason memorabilia if you want to. It's
yeah.
not a secret organization now.
It's just an excuse to get together with their buddies and then do something nice once in a while.
We all enjoy that. I mean, some of us just put together podcasts so we can talk to our friends.
Yeah. Yeah. But in the film, yeah, the whole connection to the Alexander the Great, the whole Masonic connection was a conceit of the movie that I thought was just
Mm.
genius. It's just brilliant that they added that into the
Yeah.
film, and it made for a really great connection
Oh yeah.
as well.
I mean, they do say the best. They do say the
Yeah,
best, right, adaptation, right, will be a short story to a film, not a book to a film. And this is one of the rarely good
yeah,
examples.
yeah. And sometimes when you add things that change it a little bit, but just make it more coherent,
Mm.
you can make the film even better. And that's definitely something that made the film. I don't. I wouldn't say it's better than the book, but I would just say it made it a better movie.
Yeah,
Definitely.
exactly. The book's an
Yeah.
amazing book, and the movie is an amazing movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I might start to have to go now so I can watch the movie again and read the book again. It's been lovely chatting with you. Thank you very, very much for giving me your time today.
Thomas, this is always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking to you and talking about these things, and would love to have another excuse to do this again sometime in the future.
Alex Lamas will return. In the meantime, you can be found on Instagram at Sifu Lamas. Is that right?
Well, in yes, Instagram, Sifu Lamas, and on YouTube, always say yes to adventure.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care, my friend.